Hello, hello again, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with more Cosmonarchy. As promised, we are continuing the Shambler versus Eud64. Again, I never went back and looked to see if that's the right pronunciation, but it's closer than before, so we'll say 90%, and let's get into it. It's Paradise going to be our locale du jour. Eud in the bottom right. 3 Crow with a capital C, which is actually the Shambler in the top left. What a goofy guy. He's got Hapsea with a lowercase h. He's got 3 Crow with a capital C. So, you know, back when 3 Crow was playing a little bit more commonly, or what would you say? A little bit more... Yeah, I guess a little bit more frequently. He did fool people like Newt and I think somebody else by playing as 3 Crow with a capital C, and then people thought, oh my god, I'm losing to 3 Crow? And it was pretty funny. Last game, ooh left or ooh crashed? That's a good question from Eud. I feel like there's a lot of people who don't appreciate leaving with no GG, man. There's a lot of people who think that no GG is like a bad thing. I know Hapsea was not happy with people calling him out for not doing that. He doesn't think it's a big deal. A lot of people don't think it's a big deal, but you know, the no GG stuff obviously leaves a bad taste in some people's mouths. How hard could it be to just type GG? That's a question for you in the audience. And how hard could it be for me to explain to you what Cosmonarchy is? Because we're about 2 minutes into this video, and you might not even know what we're talking about here. You can see this guy's harvesting Vespine from the geyser. He's building a fulcrum with no barracks-looking structure, which is now called a stockade. He's doing all sorts of crazy things, dude. And that's because this is Cosmonarchy. This is a very different look than Starcraft 1. And the longer the game goes on, the more different it looks indeed. I'm excited to see what happens in this PvT matchup. I do feel like the non-mirror matchups are where the rubber hits the road. I think PvT and honestly ZVP especially are kind of like my favorite matchups from StarCraft 1. And yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of that sort of thing. Like, what do those matchups look like? I feel like if you have something like those races in the game, you really want those matchups in particular to be money matchups. Oh, Eclipso was actually here watching, and he just voids immediately as soon as he's called out for potentially lagging. Rogue Gallery coming as a follow-up. So this is interesting. We'll talk about that in a moment. But as of right now, it looks like Eud is just going for the quarry. Fulcrum is already up. He's scouting all over the place. The Hierophant first will catch his Mason and probably mean that it's... Oh, no, he actually is able to speed away and escape. The Hierophant is faster, but maybe the Vulture can come up and do some little shenanigans in the early game. Looks like he will end up taking it. Hey, there you go. You even get the laugh. The problem is, can you really fight the Hierophant? I'm not so sure. You can see him zoning away with the mines. Now, this feels like StarCraft 1 to me, bro. Skirmish with the first Strider-looking unit and the Vultures slapping it around. That's very, very StarCraft 1. The Rogue Gallery is out, and he's going for a fast Kabbalist. Okay, very interesting. You know, yet another Artosis Cast video with a Dark Templar in the thumbnail, and that recently came out. And you know what? Here we have it. It's happening here, too. The world is a simulation. Only 1 Fulcrum still for Eud, though. He's still rocking the 1 Fulcrum, just building up his economy. He's not too worried about what he has to worry, you know, what he's up against here. And the Scribe is indeed going to get caught by the Vultures, sort of moving all around the map. So that's pretty good. Remember that when you're firing up a cliff, you no longer have a disadvantage in terms of a random chance to not hit your target. Instead, any attacker from up here, as long as they're a ranged attacker, of course, will get +2 weapon range shooting down a cliff. So that's very impactful for things like, I mean, honestly, for things like the Hierophant, right? It normally only has 5 weapon range, but it goes up to 7 when it's up a cliff. Kabbalists have now been banked. He's got 2 of them. By the way, they still keep the 40 damage from StarCraft 1, but they have a new passive that allows them to teleport on top of an enemy target, so getting immediately into melee range, if, and only if, they are cloaked when they attempt to do it. And you'll notice here now that mines do not reveal cloaked targets. You need to actually have detection for them, but that's because the mine works completely differently, right? We talked about this in the last video, the last episode. We mentioned that the lobotomy mine behaves very differently. So, depending on what... I almost said 3 Crow. What the Shambler wants to do here. Let's see. Does he go after the worker? It looks like he will. And there you go. And now he's going to step towards it. But the recloak comes in. You can see the attempted surround. It's not a bad idea. But Eud is just going to have to keep watching. He's kind of like kept in the background, right? Like he doesn't really have the ability to do too much from this position. He's trying to keep track of where they are. And as soon as they reveal themselves, they are liable to be focused down. So that might have been a bit of an overstep here for the Shambler. I feel like that is the Protoss equivalent of Zerglings in StarCraft 1, just moving them around the Protoss base over and over again in ZVP. That's the kind of thing that you'd be looking for. Looks like he might be able to, yep, indeed he will be able to nab that worker, but he doesn't get the Kabbalist away, and that is a very big deal. So even though he's slowed down this expansion, you got to remember the Rogue Gallery, not exactly known for being the most useful structure in the early stages of PvT. So it was kind of like moving to the side a little bit here for him, and he is now going into an Ardent Authority, a completely different tech structure or production structure. The Protoss have no tech structures, unlike Terran, who have like add-ons that you need to build to unlock more units. You see how now we have the Star Pad building an Anseal that's for detection. This treasury is slightly off-center, but it is at least complete now. And so, yeah, I feel like, going down there, he probably wanted to get more damage dealt than that. But yeah, the whole idea of like keeping the Kabbalists around until detection comes out is pretty clever. And the fact that Eud put his starport down here, or star pad down there in the back line, makes it really difficult to attack. And you also saw there that the Mason going around in a box formation over and over again made it very predictable as to whether or not the Kabbalist would be able to kill the Mason instead of it being RNG, right? And we prefer the pattern learning and being like, oh, okay, I know that it goes clockwise, so let me just do that, right? Let me just see what I can manage there. And I do feel like that's a pretty big deal, something that unfortunately we don't see that much of in games in general, is an aversion to RNG and instead going for stuff that's a little bit more skill-based, memorization-based perhaps, and being able to do that. So we have an Anchor and a Fulcrum on the foreground here. On the low ground, the Anseal is here as well for defense. A second Fulcrum being put down on the low ground, and a second Anchor, because of course the minefield there being revealed by the Protoss, I guess revealing the Protoss. They were both doing it. And this Trojan is going to sit back over here because, he can't really leave the base right now when he's about to get pressured, right? So that was the only, well, there's a mine underneath this Fulcrum, funnily enough. It's just narrowly like 1 pixel too far down to be slapped. But he will spot that, okay, you're building Fulcrums on the low ground, you got anchors. So this is going to be pretty difficult to bust. So now the Trojan will eventually be able to pick up that Phalanx, and we have seen the Phalanx drop be very successful in the past, not just in the previous cast over, but also in games down I would say down the last couple of weeks when Eud has been practicing it and seeing if he can get a lot of power out of it. So he is going to go ahead and scoop that up. As you can see, it takes up the entire capacity of the Trojan. But, some say it's too much, and hey, maybe I'm with them. Let's see what happens. Because this is the first time somebody with Eud's skill level is actually trying to make it happen, actually trying to use it. He does have a Mason of that Anchor, funnily enough. Let's see. He's going to move over here and put down a Watchdog just for anti-drop and such. There is actually an Acantor, as 2 Acantors out. So honestly, it's a question of whether or not his army is going to be close enough. The Warden here also really helps with this. He's kind of just like, if you leave military units in this area and what would you say, static defense in this area, that will be the target of the Phalanx instead of those. You can see here he's trying to first target them, and that does end up working. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But you know what? He's actually not lost that many. Even before that hit, though, he was behind in worker count, and part of that is because, again, the Rogue Gallery into Ardent, he hasn't really saved any room for an embassy, so now he's going to go ahead and move out with that. There's going to be a pylon in the back there. And I would love to leave, 2 Legionnaires here, again, you'll probably not be able to dodge that. The static defense, sure, it's helpful for shooting down the Trojan, but it's inside the mineral line, so you're not really being able to do too much there. And it definitely feels to me like, there are seemingly easy on its face, responses to this. You put 2 Legionnaires down, then he can't do anything. Okay, well, right now the Shambler's already sort of pushing back the third base attempt, and here comes the Phalanx again. 12 kills, so not a bad kill count at the end of it all. But the Trojan plus the Phalanx is fairly pricey, I want to say. Definitely still ahead in terms of the plus minus. It wasn't a bad thing to do. But obviously it takes some APM, takes some other stuff, so, I'm just trying to see, what exactly is the outcome. Does he have a big enough army to hold back the Protoss, who's gone for the Acantors, for pretty steady splash damage? As long as he keeps these Vagrants, which have the double life passive anyway, it does feel like it's going to be pretty difficult for Eud to break through that. But despite that, there isn't that much on the gateway side. Really not that many ground units at all, other than the Acantors. And so that is a very meaty last couple of salvos there from the Phalanxes. It felt like if again, I almost called him Three Crow, if the Shambler had disengaged from that fight a little bit faster, like he's got this army that's a little bit better at, taking a fight and falling back, especially with regards to the Acantor. Not exactly the falling back part, but taking, firing the shot and then crawling backwards as fast as slow as humanly possible. That's a better use of it, and that's also why you want the front line out there, of course. So there's only 2 gates right now. Rogue Gallery making Vagrant. So, like, he's making the right kinds of units out of this. I even like that he kept the Charlatan alive, apparently. Is that the same one? I guess it might be. Maybe he's made more than one, though. Not 100% sure. A Grand Library being started. That's a great choice as well, because it does mean that the Shambler will have access to things like the Amaranth, the buffed Amaranth, which has shield steel associated with it, so he can stay alive a little bit longer. He can go for Heralds, which are sort of like mini Patriarchs in a way, where they allow attackers of the Protoss arsenal to steal shields, like heal themselves, basically, with shields. I did just see that a Trojan got picked up another sieged Phalanx. So this is going to have some significant implications over here. But the worker count's actually pretty close at this stage. And the third base is operational, whereas the Shambler doesn't have his yet. He has nothing up here at 12 o'clock. Love an anti-drop pylon over here or something. I think that's something that, even if, say the Phalanx-specific interaction gets adjusted in some way, I definitely think that most Protosses haven't played against it that much. And so there's always going to be an element of like, oh man, are we, should we nerf it, or is it actually like something that can be easily responded to? And, and then the question is the response interesting, or is it kind of annoying, right? And these are all questions that we're going to figure out over time. But one of the things that I remember from, watching a lot of StarCraft 1, both presently and before, is definitely the whole point that... man, that splash radius is pretty crazy. He's going to get a little bit more action out of it. Again, putting your typing, putting your towers in the mineral line here is actually counterproductive, because normally, like, you saw how many hits went down. Like, he hit the Warden once, he hit the Matrix twice, and all of those hits were still able to kill workers. So if these structures are, off to the side, maybe behind the mineral line, you're going to lose a lot less workers, because, again, the automatic targeting of the Phalanx is going to prefer attacking the towers, right? So, yeah, there is a delay that's put into all units, but we were thinking, do we need to increase that for certain kinds of units, or should we increase it for all units? I would prefer a solution that increases it for all units, so it's not like some specific thing that, like, oh, special rule for this unit only. Of course, the other potential solution would be to make it so that you can't airlift them at all when they're dropped, but I think that has interesting battle implications for, like, in the middle of fights that I would like to preserve. So, yeah, you could use it for harassment, but what if you had, like, 3 Trojans and 3 Phalanxes and you kept, like, moving them back and forth or whatever? That's obviously something that you could think about doing. So here's the next big engagement being set up, but there's so many Phalanxes here as well. The 4th base set up at 6 o'clock, and yeah, I think Shambler's going to need a longer game if he wants to win this fight. He could try to flank over here. We do have some anchors over there. I like the positioning for defensive structures over there. But at this point, he's kind of hemorrhaged a lot of his chaff, and he's not really going to be able to hold up against that. So here he comes, going to see if he can pressure the anchors on this side, using his Architects and his Charlatans to increase the amount of DPS there. Now this is going to provoke, obviously, Eud to move forward, and we have multiple Acantors, but I do think that the Vultures and the Goliaths, oh man, so many of them going down, but it's still going to be enough, I think. Oh, look at that money shot from the splash damage of the Acantor. So even though he's kind of behind the 8-ball, it's safe to say, I think Shambler is doing pretty well for himself from this position, a bit of a deficit. And he is going to end up losing one of his Architects, but one more shot would have killed that last Phalanx on the low ground. He forces a liftoff. So, he's delaying the growth a little bit, or stymieing the growth a little bit. And actually, you look at it, there's not actually that much over here that the Terran still has. So that's pretty cool, thinking about how far behind it seemed like he was. And yet, even still, the military here not looking too hot. And maybe... it sounds silly to say, but if that Phalanx was there, would one extra Phalanx have made the difference instead of being, left on the drop? It still did a lot of damage. You can't say anything else other than that. But At this point, you know, stopping the stopping the fourth base from going down. Now it's flying over to the 3 o'clock position. That's definitely a good position to be in. Yes, there's a worker deficit, but you at least have access to even Vespene harvesting, which is going to allow your tech to stay the same. Obviously, you do have to probably think about adding more gateways, but where is the mineral float? There really isn't much right now because, again, he's lost so many workers and he's reproducing them. So, you know, it might even be worth making a second embassy at this stage. Certainly thinking about another base since your opponent has it. And I love this from the Shambler, moving forward to attack on that side with his next set of units. He did end up excaring with a single Architect. And so, yeah, that's going to be a canceled quarry, and he is going to have to lift it up. And honestly, I respect the idea of attacking the... oh, well, definitely attack these specialist units. Ooh, is he going to get it? No, it narrowly escapes with 23 health. Not really that much dedicated anti-air over here, but... I was going to say, I respect the idea of going after the workers, but why not kill the treasury too, you know? Feels like he definitely could. All right, his Acantor is moving through. He's only got 3 of them right now, and I mean, that was the same number that he had where he got some serious money shots when the Terran army tried to get a little too big for its britches and move too fast forward. So you can see how hard it is for Eud to actually take an engagement here with his mech army. It's much more about finding a spot and deploying in it and then sitting and waiting. Now this looks really good for him because he is on the high ground with a lot of his phalanxes. That +2 weapon range definitely applies. And at this stage right now, we've got an Irradiate cast from the Seraph, some D-Matrixes coming out to try to keep those mech units alive under sustained artillery fire. And look at that money shot with so many phalanxes. It can be quite powerful, you know, just over the cliff there. Very satisfying stuff from the Terran POV. And, you know, this is with them having a mortar that actually travels, too, so there's a little bit of reaction time that you can have there. And I know some people have been saying, like, oh, well, if you want the drop to be less powerful, just make it so that there's more of the slower travel time. And everybody immediately was like, what about the fact that they already can't hit Zealots? Because they just walked past it. Let's see what happens over here. I think he's just going to go ahead and trade down the chaff, but he does have to watch out for the phalanxes in the back. He's walking through the Irradiate, which is dealing a lot of damage to the rest of his units. His Architect is staying alive somehow. Okay, finally ends up going down, but that is going to be another army wipe. And there's still a lot of mech units, but you know what? This is, again, there's an element of this force that feels a little bit Paper Tiger-y without the phalanxes being able to join him. And so, you know, the 4th base only now coming down, that feels a little bit late. Admittedly, he hasn't sent another set of harassment units off to 3 o'clock, and 6 o'clock is reestablishing as well. So it does feel, it's pretty hard for the Shambler to stab in towards the 6 o'clock position, but it's a lot easier, a lot more open to leave a couple of units over there, right? And that's something that he even did pretty well at the start of this game with a single Legionnaire stopping this 3rd base from going down, but also he did that pretty well in the previous game as well, I thought. So maybe fighting from a little bit more of a behind position here. Let's see. He's got a lot more minerals now, so he's going to go ahead and put down some static defense at 12 o'clock. At this point, this is great. This is all well and good. But I do feel like you need to start thinking about your next base, actually. Not just because your opponent has it, but also because you want to be up a good amount of bases in general in this matchup, I think. You know, your army doesn't trade as cost efficiently. This rule is still true from StarCraft 1. Your army does not trade as cost efficiently as your opponents, but you want to be able to have a big tidal wave to sort of crack upon them, and you also want to be able to send a couple of units out for harassment sakes. So right now, it looks like the attack is going to be coming on Eud's terms. Not really a great set of surrounding coming out here. The phalanxes have entrenched. A couple of these Architects down here are taking some pretty heavy damage, but he's forced to unsiege, so now this is the time to strike. It looks like he recognizes that. His Architects are going to get cleaned up by the Goliaths. Nice D-Matrix onto the Cataphract as well, just to keep it alive from sustained fire. And where is the follow-up? What is coming out of the gateways at this point? There's not really that many units. This could actually be the death push that grinds the Shambler into a pulp. Especially with the Azazels constantly using D-Matrix. It doesn't just give shields, it also gives a healing over time. So it's supposed to be like, I'm picking this one unit, intervening and saying, no, you are not dying today. At least not right now. And then, of course, Focus Fire will still kill it anyway, but such is the way of life. But yeah, I think that's probably going to be it. And the Shambler definitely was competitive, despite the Phalanx attacks. But you know what? Finding a way to respond to that is definitely going to be an interesting skill. All because... Yeah, here it is. I was waiting for it. Oh. Never mind. He's just a goofball. Oh my god. Hey, it's good. I mean, we made Shambler practice a little bit. I don't know if Demiurges would have really helped out in this situation with all the phalanxes, but maybe. I'm willing to... I feel like the Ardent actually did a lot. The Ardent units did a lot in this game, but you know how it is. Shambler's got to find a reason to type. It's funny, I thought for sure he was going to type about the phalanx drop, but instead he was like, what is the other reason I can type about this? Because I've already typed about the phalanx drop today. He actually typed a comment as well on the previous video. So, like I said earlier, you know, whenever I talk about like, I wonder what Shambler was thinking when he did XYZ thing, he'll always tell me. He'll always tell me. It's hell the whole world. So Eud is just using this as macro practice, trying to keep his macro down. He does have an anvil being constructed at 3 o'clock. Maybe we'll get to see a nuclear explosion before the Shambler GG or no GG. But I kind of feel like that was the last kick in the teeth that he needed to do what he told Jack Yelansky to do in one of those tournaments, to lay down and die. But who knows? Oh no, not the Seraph. You need that to nuke him later. Well, he got an irradiate off at the end. All right. There we go. No GG, of course. I just needed to speed that up because obviously he was just in a no GG kind of mood. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a 2-0 in this set of games between Eud and the Shambler in favor of our Terran player. We are, of course, a big fan of Terrans finding representation. You remember all those people that said, there's no way, dude, Terran can't win versus Protoss. It's impossible. Well, where are you now? And also, please nerf toss. All right, GG, boys. We'll be back tomorrow with more games.